Alright, Piss and Vinegar day 30, I think. Big 30 day. So, arm wrestling day. Starting off side pressure. And yeah, it's fucking cold as shit tonight in my cock shed once again. So, trying to stay warm. I was literally doing shadow boxing in between sets in order to get my heart rate up. And the thing is, if you're cold and you start training, once you warm up, I mean, it's hard to really cool down. Like, you know, the body's good at preserving heat. But when I first got up there, I was freezing. So, yeah, I was doing shadow boxing between sets. 3 set to 5, 36 kilos, time to progress. This shit's moving pretty easy. Yeah. And I was thinking about this today. If, you know, guys who lift weights but don't do arm wrestling, not necessarily don't like arm wrestling but haven't done it, I would highly suggest giving it a go, because you'll get your ego crushed. And what I mean by this is, you could be a big, powerful dude. Like when I first got into arm wrestling 4 years ago, I was 25 kilos heavier. I was 160 kilo bench presser. I was very strong. But I would arm wrestle people at pubs, and half the time I would lose to tradies or, you know, construction workers for you Americans who had never trained in their life. I'll get back to that in a second. Side note, I just got this new handle, so I'm just figuring out what weight works for me. I like this a lot more than the behind the back barbell wrist curl in order to hit the forearms unilaterally. But yeah, I like this better, and it's more sport specific to arm wrestling. But anyway, back to my point. If you lift weights and you're strong, you will still suck at arm wrestling. I would arm wrestle people at the pub who were skinny, didn't lift weights, but they had big, strong hands, and they'd crush me because I have small, weak, or did have small, well, still have small, but I used to have small plus weak hands. Now they're strong from arm wrestling, which has given me more masculine hands, giving me bigger wrists, and I would get crushed by these dudes. And it was like, what the fuck? Like, I'm so much stronger than this motherfucker. Why is he beating me? So it's a good ego-destroying moment when you realize, you know, yeah, you're strong, but this doesn't mean that you're good in sports. And, I mean, arm wrestling is a very minor kind of skill specificity sport. Like, compared to something like boxing, I mean, people like Bradley Martin, for example. Oh, I'll beat that dude in a street fight. No, you won't. You're so much bigger, you're so much stronger, but it doesn't matter. Like, if you don't know how to throw a jab across a hook, you don't know how to duck a punch, you don't know how to feint, you don't know how to, you know, duck, you don't know how to block, you don't know how to kind of switch back, you don't know feet movement, any of that shit that, you know, comes along with boxing, Muay Thai. If you don't know Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like all these different things, if you don't know them, you get fucked up by a dude like a quarter of your size or half your size, because just even though you're like 4 times stronger than them. So arm wrestling is a good example of that on a micro level without getting your head fucking beat in, is realizing that. Well, and the other thing is, in arm wrestling, it's actually good for bodybuilding, because, you know, if you just do boxing, it's not necessarily good for bodybuilding. It might be good for burning calories if you hate cardio and you want a fun variation of cardio, but it's not really necessarily going to give you any muscular gains, whereas arm wrestling will actually give you bigger forearms than bodybuilding training will, because you'll get all these specific, you know, parts of the forearm built that don't otherwise get built through just basic, you know, flexion and extension work. You get the wrist, you get the 2 different pronator muscles, you get better brachialis gains from partial reps, you get all these different things from arm wrestling that you wouldn't get from bodybuilding. So if you're not into arm wrestling yet, the best way to get into it would be start with Devin Larratt. You've probably even seen or heard of him before. I mean, he's been on Juji Mufu's channel. He's been on all of these different high-end bodybuilding, you know, fitness influencers channels, because he's so brutally charismatic. Like, it's impossible not to like the guy unless you're from Georgia or Russia. So I'd start with that guy and just watch his matches. Watch him versus people. Look up Devin Larratt versus Jerry Caderet, or any of the times he wins specifically. It's a very entertaining time, and that's a good introductory kind of start to arm wrestling. So yeah, anyway, rant over. Onto new movement that I haven't started. I only just started doing. I built this kind of fucking pronation machine. So for those of you watching who do understand arm wrestling, this might be to some benefit to you. This is really good. Like, obviously there's machines like Engen Terzi. He has a great pronation machine, but obviously unless you know how to weld or you have a bunch of money to buy a custom pronation machine, it's very difficult to get your hands on. But this basically does the same job. It's a prototype. I'm gonna need to kind of work upon it and make it better. But so far, all you need is PVC pipe, a spinning handlebar, and a large bolt, and then maybe some tools to cut the PVC pipe. And once you have that, now you have one of these kind of Engen Terzi pronation machines, and it works really well. I really liked this. It was really pushing my hand over into supination. I was really trying to fight that, and it allows you to train supination in a static form rather than a sort of isolation form. A lot of times when you do pronation, it's coming from the wrist, whereas this is teaching you how to keep your pronation tight and just keep the hand in the same place but rolling over with the body. So I really dig this machine. I'm gonna have to maybe make it a bit better, but so far it feels really good. And I'm still trying to tweak it. I've got to figure out how to standardize the lift, because there's a lot of different things that go into this lift that can make it easier or harder, very small nuances. So I'm going to have to standardize it. I'm going to figure out what keeps it consistent throughout, but this is really good. And if you're not, again, into arm wrestling, this will still be really good for your forearm gains, because it will train your pronation muscle, which will give you this big pop to the forearm at the elbow, which is where the forearm is at its biggest, and where the forearm has the illusion of being biggest relative to the wrist. Then I switch over to the left arm. I was trying to do it individually, so like without the static elbow kind of in one place, and then I realized that doesn't really work. It has to be all as one unit with this, just because of the biomechanics of the movement. I might make a more higher production video in the future explaining how to make this, the benefits to pronation for those of you who aren't into arm wrestling. Actually, you know what, back to my rant. It's cool to be able to beat people in an arm wrestle. I don't care what you say. People will say, oh, you know, it's gay. You're holding another dude's hand and you're looking in his eyes and you're grunting. And if you close your eyes, it would sound like a gay porno. But, I mean, okay, maybe it is a little gay, but who cares? It's still a very cool sport. And there's a lot more to it than people think. It meets the eye. Like, a lot of people think it's just, you know, straight side pressure, kind of what I was doing at the beginning of this workout. But in reality, there's so much nuance. It's kind of like a small martial art. It's like a Brazilian jiu-jitsu for the wrist, forearm, bicep, and shoulders only. So there's a lot to it, even though it's a very straightforward-looking thing. And if you can't beat your dad in an arm wrestle, I bet a lot of you guys out there who lift weights still can't beat your old man in an arm wrestle, especially if he's a tradie, and you know he's got that old man strength. He'll crush you. He'll fuck your hand up. So a lot of you guys can't even beat your old man in an arm wrestle, and that's unforgivable. So just do the bare minimum. Do the same high intensity principles. You know, don't have to do the high frequency approach that a lot of arm wrestlers do to get good at this. Just get good at wrist flexion and good at pronation, and without any technique, if you understand those two bases, you have some good fundamental strength to kind of beat your friends or dudes at the pub or whatever. It's a good way of getting free drinks if you're a kind of a party animal. Doing a bit of flexing. You can see here there's a muscle that inserts between my bicep and elbow that most people don't have. It's kind of like a tumor. It's called the pronator muscle, and you don't get that unless you do pronation-based exercises. And it will, I mean, you can see, man, it really pops the aesthetic of the forearm up a lot. So even if you don't care about arm wrestling, you should be doing those. I tried to do some back pressure, but my bicep tendon wasn't feeling too great, so I just gave it a hit. I just gave it a miss, rather. And then I finished off with some forearm extension. This is just to bring health and balance to the forearm, and well, also get aesthetics. You need big forearm flexors, so should be doing these. And even if you don't care about your forearm size, this will help with your arm wrestling performance if you like arm wrestling, because the extensors do come into play in certain kind of vectors in arm wrestling, and on top of that, it'll stop you from getting tennis elbow and other things. And even if you don't do arm wrestling, but you do a lot of grip strength and kind of a lot of cupping or wrist curls, you need to be doing these to balance out the wrist and elbow, and then just generally get better looking forearms. So yeah, 30 kilos, not too bad, not too shabby. I think after this workout, I got to count my reps and then put it down in a training log, which makes this a lot easier. And then I do a rest pause where I don't necessarily do a rest pause. I do a rest pause, yes, but then it's not full reps. It's kind of forced negatives. And then that's it. I'm done. So that's Piss and Vinegar day 30. And yeah, get good at arm wrestling, because if you're not, it's one of those quintessential man strengths to have, one of those man abilities to have. There are women out there right now who can beat you in an arm wrestle who are half your size. That should make you feel a certain way. There are women out there that can beat me as someone that trains arm wrestling half my size. I lose sleep over this idea, so you should too. See you guys tomorrow for more Piss and Vinegar. Bye-bye.